Have you ever felt invisible to your own children? You were there at every step, every fall, every achievement, and yet now, the phone doesn't ring. Your words are interrupted. Your gestures of affection go unnoticed, as if you no longer have a place. It's not anger you feel, it's something deeper. It's sadness, disappointment. A wound that doesn't bleed, but weighs heavy, very heavy. If you see yourself in these words, I want you to know something. You are not alone. And more importantly, not all is lost. In this special video, you'll discover what to do when your own children begin to ignore you, treat you with indifference or even with disrespect. And most importantly, how to regain your self-worth without yelling, without arguing, and without breaking the relationship. You'll be surprised by the final revelation. But before we begin, I want you to pay close attention to this story. Because what Mrs. Carmen went through may sound a lot like what you're going through now. Mrs. Carmen, a 66-year-old woman, was always the heart of her family. Strong, generous, with a heart that seemed to have no limits. After years of working and caring for everyone, she dreamed of a peaceful old age surrounded by her two sons, Alejandro and Carlos, and her daughter Laura, sharing moments, feeling valued. And for a while, that's exactly how it was. Family gatherings were frequent, Sunday lunches full of laughter, and even though conversations were mostly about her grandchildren or her children's work, she still felt like she belonged. How lucky I am, Carmen would think, while preparing her rice pudding recipe, the one her youngest son always asked for since childhood. It was her way of still caring, of still being useful. But as often happens with good things, there came a point when something changed. It all started with small things, barely noticeable. A call that went unanswered. He must be busy, thought Mrs. Carmen as she put her phone away. Then, a family dinner cancelled at the last minute. They have their own lives, she told herself to feel better. But soon the unexpected changes became routine. One Sunday, while preparing her famous rice pudding, she overheard her oldest son Alejandro on the phone in the garden. No, we can't stay long today. You know how Mom is with her endless stories. Carmen felt like she had just been hit by an invisible slap. Is that how they saw her? As a burden? As someone whose words didn't even deserve a few minutes of attention? The dessert was left unfinished. Carmen sat down at the small kitchen table, the one where she had comforted her children so many times when they were little. Ironically, now no one seemed to notice her own tears. The following weeks were worse. At a family gathering, her daughter Laura interrupted her 3 times as she tried to share a story. "Mom, you've told that like 1,000 times," she said, with the tone we use when talking to children. The grandchildren laughed. Her son-in-law looked away, uncomfortable. And Carmen simply fell silent. "Since when did my words start meaning so little?" she asked herself at night, while looking at old photos of the same children who now seemed to see her as just another piece of furniture, useful when needed, but invisible the rest of the time. The final straw came on her 67th birthday. She had prepared a special meal with all their favorite dishes. The clock showed 2:30 p.m., half an hour past the agreed time, and no one had arrived. At 3:15, the phone rang. It was her youngest son, Carlos. "Mom, I'm sorry, we can't make it. Something came up with Elena's parents and you know how it is." No, she didn't know. She couldn't understand how a lunch planned weeks in advance could suddenly become less important than a last-minute commitment. Laura didn't even call. She sent a message. "Happy birthday, Mom, we love you. We'll stop by for a bit tomorrow." Carmen looked at the table full of food. She poured herself a glass of wine and toasted in silence. "To me," she said aloud, surprised at how strange her own voice sounded in the empty house. That night, after storing all the food in containers no one would probably pick up, Carmen found an old book in her library. She had bought it years ago, during a difficult period after her husband's death. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. She opened it at random and read, "Do not distress yourself with what is past or what is to come. Focus on the present moment." She smiled bitterly. The present. Her present was exactly what hurt. She kept reading, this time more attentively. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Carmen closed the book. Let go of the pain? How could she let go of this deep sense of abandonment? Before we continue, if you find value in these videos, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon to stay updated. As Carmen reflected on Marcus Aurelius's words, a realization slowly began to take shape in her mind. What if there was a silent trap she had unknowingly fallen into? A trap that, paradoxically, had pushed her further away from the very people she longed to be close to. It was on a rainy afternoon when Carmen met with Mateo, an old friend of her late husband. Unlike her, Mateo radiated a calmness that Carmen quietly envied. When she shared her family situation with him, Mateo's response left her momentarily speechless. "You see, Carmen," Mateo said as he poured her a cup of chamomile tea, "when we raise our children, we do it from the purest love. But over time, many parents start building an invisible ledger of sacrifices. We begin to expect our children to pay us back proportionally for everything we've invested in them." Carmen nodded slightly, remembering how many times she had thought, "After all I've done for them." She didn't even need to finish the sentence. Mateo seemed to read her mind. "What's most fascinating," he added, "is that the more we expect that recognition, the less likely we are to receive it. It's a painful but eye-opening paradox." "And how did you realize this?" Carmen asked, genuinely intrigued by the serenity in Mateo's voice as he spoke about something that caused her so much pain. "The hard way," he replied with a nostalgic smile. "I spent years feeling resentful, repeating all my sacrifices like a mantra every time my kids didn't act how I wanted them to, until I started keeping a journal." "A journal?" Carmen raised her eyebrows, skeptical. "Yes, but not just any journal. An expectations journal. Every time I felt let down by my children, I wrote down exactly what I had expected from them and how I felt when that expectation wasn't met. It was eye-opening, Carmen. Most of my frustrations came from expectations I had never clearly expressed, or that, to be honest, were unrealistic." The sky began to clear, and the soft evening light filled Mateo's cozy living room. Carmen looked at the family photos on the shelf. In them, Mateo was smiling alongside his children and grandchildren. "And that worked? Just writing your expectations down?" "Not right away. Writing them was only the first step. The real challenge came after. I stopped mentioning my past sacrifices. I stopped saying things like, 'After all I've done for you,' or 'I gave up so much so you could.' That changed everything. Conversations with my kids started flowing, without that unspoken tension." Carmen sat quietly absorbing what he'd said. She remembered all the times she had subtly reminded her children of her efforts. All those sentences that began with, "I always," or "You never had to." "But Mateo," she objected, "isn't it fair to expect a little gratitude? I'm not asking for medals, just recognition." "Gratitude that's forced isn't gratitude, Carmen. It's obligation in disguise, and no one responds well to emotional obligations, especially our children, who may feel like they're being manipulated. The real question is, did you make those sacrifices to be thanked, or because you truly wanted to?" That question echoed deeply within Carmen. She had never considered her motivations in that light. "True love, Carmen, doesn't keep score," Mateo continued. "That may be the hardest lesson for us as parents, to learn how to give without expecting anything in return." "Sounds like a recipe for becoming a doormat," Carmen said with a sad smile. "Quite the opposite. It's the path to freedom. When you stop depending on others' recognition, even your children's, you take back your power. Your worth is no longer defined by how they treat you, but by how you treat yourself." That night, Carmen couldn't sleep. She mentally revisited every recent interaction with her children, for the first time realizing how her own expectations had colored every encounter. Maybe her children weren't deliberately ignoring her. Maybe they were just tired of an emotional exchange where they always ended up feeling like they owed something. Carmen's insomnia turned out to be the first step in a transformative awakening. In the shadows of that sleepless night, one question began to take root in her mind. What if, instead of waiting for her children's recognition, she found a purpose so compelling that they naturally wanted to be part of her life? That simple idea carried the power of a personal revolution. The next morning, while making her coffee, Carmen remembered something she had once read about Viktor Frankl, the psychologist who survived the Holocaust. Frankl believed that when we can't change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. "I'm not just an ignored mother," Carmen thought as she watched the steam rise from her cup. "I'm a woman with decades of experience, talents, and interests that I've let sleep for far too long." That very day, Carmen walked past a small woodworking shop in her neighborhood. She had never paid attention to it before, but something made her stop. Through the foggy glass, she saw an older man patiently carving a piece of wood. His hands, weathered by years, were turning something ordinary into something beautiful. Without thinking twice, Carmen walked in. "I've always been fascinated by woodworking," she confessed to the shop owner, though she had never voiced that interest before. "Do you think someone my age could learn?" The carpenter, a man named Joaquin, gave her a knowing smile. "I started at 60 after retiring. Wood doesn't care how old the hands are that shape it." Over the following weeks, Carmen discovered a whole new world under Joaquin's guidance. Every cut, every sanding, every finished piece gave her back something she had lost. A sense of ability, of creativity, of being someone beyond just a mother. Woodworking became her refuge, and paradoxically, a bridge to reconnect with her children in a new way. One day, while working on a small cherry wood box, Carmen recalled a story Joaquin had told her about a man named Antonio, another late-blooming student. Antonio's son, an architect, had started asking him for woodworking tips for his projects. That created a new kind of bond, one built on shared experience and mutual respect. It wasn't attention that changed the relationship, but the discovery of a personal purpose. "I don't need my children to see me as their eternal savior," Carmen thought as she applied the finish to her creation. "I need them to see me as a whole person, with passions of my own, and a life that's still blooming." The transformation didn't happen overnight. There were days when the old patterns tempted her back, but whenever Carmen felt the need for recognition creep in again, she returned to her makeshift workshop in the garage and let her hands speak through the wood. Slowly, things began to shift, not in grand gestures, but in quiet, meaningful moments. Her son, Alejandro, shared a new hobby of his. Her daughter, Laura, asked to see her woodworking during a surprise visit. Even her granddaughter, Sophia, mesmerized by a musical box Carmen had carved, asked if she could learn too. The most surprising part? Carmen realized she no longer desperately needed those moments of attention. Her worth was no longer measured by how much her children saw or validated her. She had found what Viktor Frankl described as essential, a sense of purpose, even in the midst of adversity. Before continuing with the story, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel with the bell so you won't miss future videos. And if you enjoy this type of content as much as I do, comment, "I love these stories." By the way, also comment on what you'd like to see in upcoming videos. I read all of your comments. Let's keep learning together and improving our lives. 3 weeks into her reinvention journey, Carmen discovered something fascinating while observing her woodworking mentor, Mr. Joaquin. It wasn't his impressive skill with tools that commanded respect among his students, but rather the long silences he held before each important instruction. While others nervously rushed to speak after a mistake, Mr. Joaquin simply remained silent, observed, and then intervened with precision. "Silence is a tool more powerful than any chisel," he once told her, while helping correct an uneven cut. That night, Carmen couldn't stop thinking about the idea. She remembered how, in her interactions with her children, especially when she felt ignored, her first instinct was always to talk more, explain more, justify herself more. But what if, as the Stoic philosophy Matteo had introduced her to suggested, true power actually lay in doing the opposite? The following weekend, her son Alejandro stopped by. As usual, he was distracted by his phone while Carmen talked about her new passion for woodworking. Instead of insisting or showing frustration as she might have done before, Carmen practiced what she had started calling strategic silence. She simply stopped speaking and continued working on her project. The silence created such an unexpected void that Alejandro lifted his eyes from his phone. "What are you doing, Mom?" he asked, genuinely curious for the first time in months. That small moment of connection was worth more than hours of one-sided conversations. Carmen dug deeper into this concept and discovered it was much more than just staying quiet. It was a practice known as active listening, where one fully concentrates on the other person's message, both verbal and nonverbal. It wasn't just about hearing words, but truly understanding what the other person was trying to express. Active listening isn't just staying quiet while the other person speaks, Matteo later explained when they shared their discoveries. It's about creating a safe space where the other feels they can speak freely, without fear of being interrupted or judged. This idea struck a chord with Carmen, who recalled how many times she had interrupted her children to correct or advise them, never truly letting them speak fully. The next time her daughter Laura visited with the grandchildren, Carmen put her new skill to the test. Instead of bombarding her with questions or unsolicited advice, she listened attentively while Laura talked about challenges at work. She resisted the urge to jump in with instant solutions and simply asked clarifying questions like, "How did that make you feel?" or "What do you think you could do about it?" To her surprise, Laura opened up in a way she hadn't in years. "You know, Mum, it's so nice being able to talk to you like this," she said before leaving, giving her a spontaneous hug that brought tears to Carmen's eyes. Carmen began to understand why Stoic philosophers placed so much value on strategic silence. It wasn't about remaining quiet out of resignation. It was about realizing, as the Stoics taught, that it's not external events that disturb us, but our opinions about them. By consciously managing her reactions and choosing silence when appropriate, she could avoid unnecessary conflicts and maintain her emotional balance. One afternoon, her youngest son, Carlos, criticized her method of preparing the traditional rice pudding. Instead of immediately defending herself as she would have in the past, Carmen took a deep breath and calmly replied, "That's an interesting perspective. What do you think we could improve?" The tension immediately dissolved, and her son, surprised by her response, began explaining his ideas respectfully. That simple response about the rice pudding revealed a power Carmen had never imagined she possessed. It was as if she had discovered an invisible shield, not to hide behind, but to shine through. And the most surprising part was what happened next. The very next day, her son returned with a small recipe book. "Mom, I found a few variations of rice pudding we could try together," he said, with a smile Carmen hadn't seen in months. It wasn't just the suggestion that surprised her. It was the tone, free from the condescension that used to sting so deeply. How strange, Carmen thought as she flipped through the book, how a simple response can change so much. She recalled a quote by Marcus Aurelius she had once underlined, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." By responding with dignity instead of defensiveness, she had broken the vicious cycle of resentment. Over the following weeks, Carmen began practicing what she came to call dignifying responses. When her daughter Laura criticized her outfit, instead of feeling hurt or lashing back, Carmen replied, "I understand you see things differently, and I respect your view. I'm open to hearing your ideas." The effect was immediate. Laura, expecting her mother's usual heated defense, was momentarily caught off guard. The conversation, one that might have turned into a quarrel, shifted into a genuine exchange of perspectives. It wasn't submission Carmen was practicing, but something much more powerful, the conscious choice of how to respond. "It's like you've changed, Mom," Laura commented one afternoon as they shared coffee. "You're different, more present." Carmen smiled. She hadn't really changed. She had just learned how to show who she truly was without the defensive armor she had built over the years. Her woodworking teacher, who had become an unexpected mentor, explained to her one day, "In the workshop, a tool used carelessly can ruin months of work. Words are no different. A rushed response can destroy years of relationship." Carmen nodded, recognizing the deep truth in that simple analogy. What Carmen discovered was that dignity isn't about demanding respect. It's about holding on to your self-worth, regardless of how others treat you. It was a Stoic practice at its core, to distinguish between what she could control, her response, and what she couldn't, others' words or actions. During a particularly tense family dinner, her son-in-law made a sarcastic comment about the outdated ideas of Carmen's generation. Everyone at the table held their breath, anticipating the storm, but Carmen, applying her new philosophy, responded with a genuine smile. "That's an interesting perspective. I'd love to better understand why you feel that way." The tension melted away like fog in the sun. What was unfolding within Carmen's family was a quiet transformation. Her children began choosing their words more carefully, not out of fear of an emotional explosion, but out of a newfound respect for the woman who met discourtesy with unshakable dignity. Carmen's response sparked a mix of surprise and curiosity in her son. He looked at her as if suddenly standing before a different person, and in a way, he was. Carmen had discovered something that family therapist Carmen Rodriguez had often observed in her years of practice. When parents stop treating their adult children like kids and begin to recognize them as equals, the invisible barrier behind most distancing begins to fall. That night, while organizing her carpentry tools, Carmen reflected on this new dynamic. It wasn't just about responding with dignity anymore, it went deeper. It was about genuinely recognizing who her children had become as adults. For decades, she had been so focused on what she needed from them that she'd forgotten to truly see them for who they were. Have you ever noticed how sometimes we get so caught up in seeking validation that we forget to give genuine recognition? It's like we're wearing glasses that only let us see what we're lacking, never what we're capable of offering. The next morning, Carmen did something unusual. She called her daughter Laura for no particular reason, simply to praise her for an article she had published on her nutrition blog. It wasn't a call to complain or to ask for anything. It was just to recognize her work, her effort, her passion. "Mom, are you okay?" was Laura's initial reaction, clearly not used to this kind of conversation. Carmen smiled on the other end of the line. "Perfectly. I just wanted to say, I read your article on mindful eating. I loved how you explained the concept of connecting with food. You really have a gift for making complex ideas accessible." There was a brief silence on the other end, just a few seconds, though it felt eternal to Carmen. "Thank you, Mum. I didn't know you had read it." Laura's voice sounded different, warmer. In the following weeks, Carmen fully embraced what she now called her virtuous circle of recognition. Instead of chasing appreciation, she started to actively recognize the specific qualities, accomplishments, and efforts of her adult children. And it wasn't the usual vague praise like, "You do everything so well." It was precise, thoughtful acknowledgement of things she genuinely admired. When her youngest son, Carlos, explained a new project at work, Carmen didn't interrupt or compare it to her own experiences. Instead, she acknowledged his ability to innovate and take calculated risks. "You've always had that bravery to try new paths," she told him. "It's a quality I truly admire." What fascinated Carmen most was the domino effect this change created. Without asking or expecting it, she started receiving more calls. Her opinions were sought out more often, and most surprisingly, her children started truly listening to her. The virtuous circle Carmen had initiated was quietly transforming all her relationships. She was no longer the mother constantly seeking validation, but the one who genuinely celebrated her children as independent adults with their own lives. One afternoon, while sharing coffee in her new carpentry workshop, her son asked, "What made you change, Mom? It's like you've suddenly, I don't know, found a new way of being yourself." Carmen smiled, running her hand over a piece of wood she was sanding. "I discovered that when we stop seeking recognition and start offering it genuinely, something magical happens. It's like by truly seeing the other, we finally allow ourselves to be seen." That small gesture of gratitude was just the beginning. Unknowingly, her son had opened the door to something few parents experience, the beautiful transition from a hierarchical relationship to an adult friendship. Gradually, the changes started to become evident. Alejandro, her oldest son, invited her out for a coffee, not to ask for something, not out of obligation, but simply to chat. They talked about politics, music, and laughed over anecdotes. And for the first time, it wasn't a conversation between a mother and her child, but between two adults who recognized and enjoyed each other's company. That night, Carmen wrote in her journal, "For years, I sought respect from the role of mother. And now that I've let go of that effort, they see me as someone they want to be with." And she was right, because sometimes, when we stop insisting on a certain role, we start occupying a new one, freer, truer. On a quiet afternoon, while showing Laura her carpentry projects, a conversation about relationships came up. But this time, it wasn't a mother advising her daughter, it was woman to woman. They listened to each other, they understood each other, and something deep was woven between them. She no longer sought validation, she now cultivated her own fulfillment. As Marcus Aurelius said, "You cannot force anyone to value you, but you can live in a way that makes it hard not to." And so it happened. Her children began calling her more, including her more, admiring her. On her birthday, instead of the usual rushed lunch, they organized a trip to a pottery workshop, because they knew that would make her happy, because they were finally seeing the person, not just the role. The transformation was as subtle as it was powerful. Carmen didn't just reconnect with her children, she reconnected with herself. And that changed everything. Carmen's story isn't just about a mother who regained the respect of her children, it's the story of a woman who, without making noise, dared to change the foundation of her family world, who stopped clinging to the role that once defined her to become someone even more authentic, freer, more herself. Because there comes a time in life when it's not about controlling nor imposing, but about inspiring. Carmen didn't demand love, she cultivated it. She didn't ask for space, she built it with firm boundaries and an open heart. And by doing so, she taught her children something no direct lesson could have, that respect, connection, and admiration don't come from silent sacrifice, but from the coherence between what one feels, says, and does. Today, Carmen no longer needs her children to see her as the perfect mother, because now they see her as someone they admire, someone with whom they share, and above all, someone they listen to. And perhaps that's one of the most beautiful ways to transcend into adult life, to stop being the caregiver and become the person who inspires. So, if you're also in that stage where you feel the role of mother, father, or caregiver is beginning to change, don't see it as a loss. See it as an opportunity, a new phase where you can rediscover yourself, enjoy more genuine relationships, and above all, begin to live more for yourself. Because as Carl Jung said, the unlived life is a disease from which one can die. Don't let that happen to you. Do like Carmen, live, change, evolve, and let others see you shine. Because the greatest gift you can give to your family isn't your sacrifice, it's your authenticity, your joy, your example. So go ahead, be brave, be you. And if you decide to write your own story from today, Carmen would be proud, and so would I. If you've made it this far, write in the comments, "Today I choose myself," so I'll know who the victorious ones are who made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate notifications for more content like this in the future. Share this video with your loved ones so they can implement this wisdom starting today. And consider supporting the channel by becoming a member. By doing so, you'll not only be contributing financially but also enjoying exclusive benefits. I'll leave the link in the pinned comment for you to take a look. Thank you for your support. Now click on this video to continue feeding your mind with wisdom. A big hug and see you next time.